Hello again, everyone. Mike Martin again. This is the second video for week 7. We are working with Canvas in this video. And if you watched the previous video, I went over the multimedia aspects of the first part of the assignment, where you embed video and audio into your page using a couple of different methods, and then demonstrated some Canvas things that I'd been working with. And I didn't go through a full explanation there because your book and your readings should do an adequate job of explaining the aspects of Canvas and the multimedia that you should be reading. I'll try to do a little bit more of that here, but I'm also going to cover some basic coding that will help you consolidate some things. If you're familiar with coding and you're good at it, then this will be kind of boring for you. But these are some things that you may not have known, or you may want to pick up and practice. You don't have to have everything all the time in every function that you create. You can create isolated functions and call them as they're needed. And that's one of the basics of coding, and especially with object-oriented programming. So once again, we are in our template, or my template, and I have a canvas that's set that's big enough to handle what I want to do here. And that's something that you should know, that you can style canvas in your CSS just like you can anything else, and set backgrounds, and you could even have a background image and then animate the characters in the foreground if you wanted to. That's something that you can play with on your own. For this week's assignment, they're asking you to do a couple of things with Canvas, like draw a couple of table lamps. And so I created some buttons that would draw a lamp. Lamp 1 has a polygon shade, a triangle stem, and a rectangle base with text. And then lamp 2 uses the same shade and base, and then I worked out how to insert this rounded rectangle as its stem. And then I have a clear canvas button, which will clear the canvas all except for the background. And then I've got some animation whereby I could draw lamp 2, turn the light on, and then turn the light off. I can also clear the canvas and create the light and turn it on at the same time, and then turn it off. So that's the minimum for this assignment, is to draw 2 lamps and animate something. You may have a different form of animation that you want to use, and that's fine, but I'm going to walk through how I did this, and maybe it'll give you a starting place for your assignment this week. Okay, so this is by far the most time consuming. We'll start up here in the top, and I have a habit of doing this. I create a style that's local to the page I'm working on so that I don't have to flip back and forth between files. And then if I need to incorporate this into my master style sheet, I'll simply take these styles, which are usually just classes or ID selectors, and put them into the master page and then remove them from here. But in this case, I wanted to work with my style sheet locally and my JavaScript locally, which you can always take your JavaScript out and put it into the main file like I have listed here and run it from there. Because I'm using functions and because I'm not depending on window.onload for anything, all of my functions are called and have listeners set, so I can just eliminate that from the page. So I created some styles to control my canvas, and I created my canvas down here in the main area. And my buttons are here. Here's my canvas. And then some more buttons on the bottom side of my canvas. So really simple setup, just canvas, add an ID, add a class if you've got some styles that you want to apply to it, and then get busy programming this thing. Now, the buttons call these events, and these events call other events. And I separated them out into drawing the base, drawing the stem, and drawing the shade so that I could experiment with the placement on the page individually by calling separate functions. And I actually had buttons that allowed me to click and draw the base, click and draw the stem, and then click and draw the shade to experiment with that. So I set it up so that I could do those things individually, and then I could experiment with where they lay in context to each other, and that made it easier for me to make these things look like a lamp. I can tell you right now, I am not an artist, so me being able to draw shapes with code Yeah, that's helpful. So a computer can draw a straight line, but I can't. All right, so the first thing that I have inside my script is the init file. And you'll find this used a lot where you have something that's going to be common to every function that you call, or a lot of the functions that you call, and that is to set up your canvas, in this case, and your context. As I said, the canvas that you want to get off the page, you want that to be in your code and available to all of your functions. And so you also want to set the context at 2D since we're not doing any 3D rendering today. And canvas width and height can be used to clear if you're going to clear the canvas out. So those things are going to be useful in a lot of the things that you're going to create secondarily. So just set up an initialization function and call it from within wherever you're working. And then the second function that I have is draw lamp 1. So drawing lamp 1, I'm going to first of all clear whatever's in there because I don't want to draw lamp 1 on top of lamp 2. And so I want to make sure that I clear out my canvas, which is just I call the initialization to get the context, and then I use clear rectangle, and there's where I came in with my width and height. In my initialization file, I set the canvas.width and canvas.height to be W and H, so now all I have to do is use those coordinates and it clears out my canvas. And so that's what clear lamp does. It just clears it out so that I'm not drawing over the top of an existing item on the page. So I have draw lamp 1 here. I'm clearing out the lamp. I'm going to draw the base, draw the stem, and draw the shade. And so those are just 3 different shapes that I happen to have isolated. So let's take a look at, what's the first one? Draw the base. The base is simple. It's a rectangle. And here's draw the base. I initialize by calling in the context. I set the fill style, and then I fill a rectangle at this location, which is 75 pixels inward, 100 pixels from the top, going across to 80 and 10. And that's my short little rectangle that I have for the lamp base. Okay, very simple. So the next thing that I call in draw lamp 1 is draw the stem. Draw the stem is using a line because I wanted a triangle for lamp 1 stem, so I had to use the initialization to get the context and then move to the location where I wanted to start the line, which was 120 pixels in horizontally and 30 pixels from the top. And then my first line is going to go 90 and 100, which means that I'm moving it a diagonal downward. Now that's something that took some experimentation. So you will want to experiment with drawing a line and moving it in different directions so that you can tell how your coordinates inside that box are going to affect the line you're trying to draw. That's what I did. Is I set an initial point, move to, and then I drew a line where I thought would go at a right to left angle downward. And it took a little bit of experimentation to get it right, but I finally figured out how these coordinates relate to each other inside that box. And then it was easy to replicate that line on the other side and mirror it because it's going to be the same length. You see the 100s match, but their horizontal coordinates are going to be much different. So we wanted to spread that out as we went down the page, and that's what the 140 is doing, is spreading the triangle out and then closing up the line. So the fill style was a dark slate gray, and then I just set the CTX to fill, and that's how you fill a group of lines as a shape. All right. The next part of the drawing process that I called is draw the shade. And draw the shade was another line because it's a polygon. I wanted that to be shaped like a lampshade, and most of the lampshades I've seen are kind of triangular, a cut-off triangle, or a polygon if you look at them from a two-dimensional aspect. And so I started that line by moving to a coordinate on the page 90 pixels in horizontally and 10 pixels off the top, and then moving to 30 and 50, which gave me a line once again moving from right to left downward. Okay, so experiment with that, get your lines drawing straight, and then find a way to close those up to create that shape that you're trying to shape. Close the path. There's that close path. So in case you miss out on anything, this will close the path up, and then you'll have a shape. And then you can set the color of the shape that you want to fill, or if you don't want to fill it, you can use a stroke consideration so it can be transparent. Either way, you set the fill style or set the stroke to a color and then a size for the stroke if you want to, and then you can fill it or stroke it. And that's the way you would do that. So those are the three things that I called after I called the initialization. Draw lamp one. Each one I call the init in there so I can get the context. And here I wanted to set the context for the font and then put it right here in the draw lamp one. So when I'm drawing lamp one, I'm calling these three functions: clear lamp, draw base, draw stem, draw shade, 4 functions. Then I set the initialization and use that context to set my font and put the text in. And that's how we drew lamp one. Lamp two is drawing using stem 2. The only thing that's different there is there's draw stem and there's draw stem 2. So I'm actually just using a round rectangle function, using the context and giving it the coordinates. And I experimented here because you can actually set these variables out to be separate from another function. So if you're doing this in a loop and you're drawing several of these rectangles, you could set out your variables to your start and end points and just use the X variable whenever you needed to. But they have to be in the right context because you remember that the 4 coordinates here mean something else. This last little piece over here, the 10, is kind of a stranger. We haven't seen it before. What do you think that is? If you guess that it is the radial for the rounded rectangle edges or corners, you would guess correctly. So we have the 4 coordinates of our horizontal, vertical, to horizontal, vertical to get the rectangle drawn, and then we set the degree of radians on the rounded rectangle corners. And that's what the rounded rectangle function does, is it accepts that 5th argument to set the rounding on the corners. All right. So I hope these examples are good. Drawing the light on, or the animation that we created, is simply a matter of changing styles. So when let me go to draw lamp 2 on, I'm clearing what's in there. I draw the base, I draw the stem, and then I draw the shade on. And then I set the canvas context. Remember, the initialization gives me my access to the canvas object. And then I just put the class list.add BG color, and that's where I change the background color. And then when I draw it off, I simply set the background color to remove that class, and it removes that class and goes back to its original. So it's a relatively simple process that you already know how to do, but you can do the same thing by using the canvas object that you call with your initialization and use the class list.add to add a color or some other change to the style sheet. And then you can put your stroke in there where you're using a font like I did here to designate that this lamp is on. That's all there is to it. That's what I did. Drawing the shade on is I'm actually just drawing the same shade. I'm using the same exact values here, except I changed the fill style to yellow. So let's see that one more time in action. So I'm going to clear the canvas, draw lamp 1, it's my triangular shape. Draw lamp 2 is my rounded rectangle. And then clear the canvas again, draw the light as on, and you can see that when I call this function to draw the light on, I'm adding the class to change the background color of canvas to yellow, and then the shade to another shade of yellow so that it looks like it's emitting a whole lot of light. Unfortunately, it doesn't affect the base or anything like that. Turn the lamp off and it gets dark in the room. Turn the lamp on, the room lights up. And it's just a matter of removing that class and changing the shade back to its original. So that's my animation. That's all the secrets that I have to share with you. I hope that this has been helpful. You just kind of have to get in there, read your lesson, use these context functions to move the lines around the way you want them, and experiment with it. I hope you have a good time with this, and I hope you start early enough to play with it a little bit. Don't be rushed at the end of this, because there's nothing worse than starting late and not getting done in time to turn in a complete lesson. This is doable. It took me, roughly a half a day to get this all done and ready to go. So I hope that you have a good time with this, and I'll see you at the end of the term coming up shortly. So make sure that you're getting in those lessons in. If you're behind, please take some time to get caught up. I don't want to see anybody get out of this course with less than passing grade. So please get caught up if you need to, and I'll see you in the next video.